What's going on, guys? So I am actually out here at the storage facility doing some work, and I figured I would go over a topic that a lot of people have asked me recently, and it specifically relates to the quality differences or some of the differences between different manufacturers of high-end luxury RVs. So whether you're comparing something like a Lux to a DRV to a Redwood, there's all sorts of nice fifth wheel brands out there, including Riverstone. And people generally want to say, well, if they see the interior of one or if they see some features on another one, is it truly better than one of the other luxury fifth wheels? So let's talk about that. All right, guys, so first of all, and probably the most important thing to remember, is that all of the manufacturers are about selling their product. They're about getting a product that you're going to want, that you're going to feel comfortable with, that you believe is going to be one that you will buy over another brand. And when it comes to what they do differently, some of them approach that differently. So for instance, if you're looking at a Lux, you might see the interior, you might see some of the construction perks as things that draw you towards that brand. And many of the reasons people buy Lux is because it is a very customizable and a very custom brand of fifth wheel. So when you get into one, you know that things are going to be done a certain way to meet your specific needs. That being said, though, there are going to be limitations, such as what their cabinetry shop might be able to put out, what their capabilities are, what materials they have available for them to do certain construction aspects and perks. In many cases, they're going to be willing to customize those. So they'll be able to go outside of their normal channels to get products or to get components that you might want on your specific unit since you're having it custom built. When it comes down to some of the other components like the chassis, when it comes to the frame, when it comes to the wheels and tires, you'll probably have a limited number of customizable options there simply because they really don't want to have to source a frame or have a special frame built just for a specific unit. It doesn't mean that they can't do it, it just generally means that they don't do it. Now, all that being said, that's just Lux. When it comes to DRV, DRV is definitely more of a mainstream luxury brand. They build an incredibly solid unit. They have a lot of construction perks that can draw people in. The triple stacked frame, two 6-inch sections on top of a 3-inch section. Basically a 15-inch frame section that's fully boxed. That's cool. They have other really nice perks, independent suspension, automotive grade disc brakes. You can get it with a full fiberglass roof. You have a lot of options available with a brand like DRV, but it is still considered kind of a semi-mainstream brand. It's under the Thor umbrella, even though they have a lot of flexibility to make the product the way they want to make it to ensure that you're getting what you're looking for. Now let's talk about brands like Redwood. Redwood is also a very nice brand, and it is a luxury brand, similar to Riverstone, so I'll clump the two together. You're not going to have a lot of customizable features baked into them, though. They are going to be essentially an off-the-shelf luxury brand that do offer a lot of really great construction perks. Like on a Riverstone, 3-inch thick sidewalls, a hung wall with insulation that's very residential in nature. You have a very nice fiberglass coating on the outside. You can get them with independent suspension and disc brakes. You have a very nice solid chassis. The frame on a Riverstone is a very well constructed frame, and it's very specific to Riverstone. There are some other brands that share a similar frame, but the frame that they use is a high-end frame, just like the frame that's put on a Lux fifth wheel. Now, if it comes to going beyond the floor plan offerings they have, that's where you're going to find some difficulty. If you are looking for some very customizable features inside, you'll also probably not be able to get a lot of those on a brand like Riverstone or even Redwood, simply because they are essentially off-the-shelf brands. If you want to go to a truly customized fifth wheel, you would have to start with a brand like Lux, and you'd also have to go with brands like New Horizon and Spacecraft, who make very, very custom one-off fifth wheels. But because of that, you're going to pay a premium, but you're going to get exactly what you're looking for. Most of the purely customized brands that will let you essentially pick exactly what type of furniture you want, the specific brand of refrigerator you want, the specific flooring that you want inside of it, those brands will end up costing you upwards of about $130,000 to $170,000 or more, depending on who's making it and the perks that differentiate them. But the question people ask most often, and this is definitely one that comes up when you see something like the Leigh Beacon that I recently did a review on, people say, well, how does that compare to a Lux or a DRV? Well, there are a lot of things that make them similar, but there are a lot of things that make them very different. For instance, the frame that Leigh uses on the Beacon, I wouldn't necessarily say is a direct comparison to something that you would get on a Lux or something that you would get on a DRV. The DRV frame is kind of their claim to fame. It is a very structural frame, and they are the only ones on the market that use a frame built like that. In my opinion, the DRV frame is the most robust frame you can get on a fifth wheel, aside from perhaps a purely custom chassis from someone like New Horizon or Spacecraft. Now, when you look at a Leigh frame, the frame is essentially kind of the vanilla drop frame that Lippert offers. It is a frame that is found on all sorts of quality fifth wheels from, different manufacturers you've probably heard of. They use some of the perks that more of your mainstream brands offer with their Z frame or their drop frame design. But that being said, you also have to understand that the big focus on Leigh is their pre-delivery inspection, ensuring that you get a quality unit, but more importantly, ensuring that you have a unit that feels very much like a Class A diesel pusher on the inside. The soft touch materials, the soft touch roof and walls, the hand-laid vinyl tiles that give you more of that residential or upscale Class A appeal, the woodwork and craftsmanship on the interior of a Leigh fifth wheel is second to none. It really is amazing. Leigh is very similar to maybe a Ram truck. You have a beautiful interior. Everything about the interior screams quality and beauty. The truck itself, though, is very similar to other trucks that you can buy on the market. It's not going to have purely customizable tones to it. It's going to be very customizable on the inside, but in terms of the chassis, the suspension, things like that, it's going to be very similar to other mid to high-end commercial brands that you can essentially buy off of pretty much any dealership lot. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about that because, for the most part, people don't have problems with a lot of those components. But it's very rare to see a brand like Leigh that's going to offer you optional brake upgrades or truly independent suspension or features that you might see on other brands. Now, if they come out with those, then that's going to be something different, right? If they start offering different frame upgrades or if they start offering different suspension upgrades, well, then that will also be something that sets them apart and it will move them more into that custom fifth wheel category. But they are not a custom manufacturer. They are a very high quality commercial manufacturer, and they do produce units at a much lower volume. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the parts that they use and some of the components that they use are any different. It just simply means that they spend more time putting a unit together, which can ultimately lead to a better overall quality experience at the back end of the sale. So when people ask me, is a brand like Leigh truly better than a DRV? Well, I can say from an interior perspective, there's things that I absolutely love about Leigh over DRV, even over Lux. But what I can also tell you is that from a frame and chassis perspective, it's definitely not what I would say in line with what you're going to get with a Lux or even a Riverstone or a DRV. Brands that have specifically engineered and designed frames for them stand out to me because they are focusing on construction of the chassis, perhaps over the interior design. Now, like I said, 9 times out of 10, you're probably not going to have a problem with those components that these other brands focus on talking about or bragging about. But that doesn't mean that you should overlook those. So at the end of the day, if I had to really compare a brand like Leigh to a brand like Lux or a brand like DRV or a brand like Redwood, I would definitely say it falls more into the Redwood category of fifth wheel. Most of the construction and chassis features are very similar to something like a Redwood. I don't necessarily believe it has the same construction perks as a Riverstone, but the interior to me blows away a Riverstone. So what you give up in construction perks, you get back in terms of a beautifully designed and crafted interior. In terms of comparing it to like a DRV or a Luxe, I don't necessarily think it stacks up head to head against either of the brands, simply because DRV has so many cool things about how they design their frame, how they design the chassis, how they design their braking system, their suspension system, their overall structure, that it makes them stand out, especially considering you can get a full fiberglass roof on top of it, plus all sorts of upgrades on the inside. Again, if I'm simply comparing the interior of a DRV to a Van Leigh, I would say the Van Leigh still has a one-up over the interior of a DRV, just not from a chassis perspective. And I would probably say the same thing with Luxe. Luxe builds beautiful units. They have a specialized frame that they order for their units. It is definitely different than most of the frames you see on mid to high-end fifth wheels. It's not quite as structural as something you would see on a DRV, but it is a good quality frame that's been designed specifically for their application, with some really unique cues. That being said, they can definitely offer a tremendous amount of customization on the interior. They can do some beautiful woodwork, which they do in a lot of their units. But again, I would say that Van Leigh still kind of rises above Luxe in terms of the interior when it comes to truly that customization, but not by much. Anyways, guys, I hope that answers your question. I happen to be out here. I had a little bit of a break while I'm waiting for something to kind of cool down, and I hope I was able to answer the question that you were looking for. Guys, if you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up. We'll talk to you again very soon.